2 days before Kyle Busch died, he told his son there was no limit to what he could accomplish. He wrote those words with the certainty of a father who believed he had decades left to watch that promise come true. He had no idea they would be his last public words. He had no idea that on Wednesday, May 20th, 2026, he would walk into a building in North Carolina and never walk back out. So what really happened to Kyle Busch? If you ever watched NASCAR in the 1990s and early 2000s, you know what it means when a driver finds that extraordinary edge between control and chaos and decides to live there permanently. Kyle Busch was that driver. Born May 2nd, 1985, in Las Vegas, Nevada, he arrived in a city built on boldness, on the belief that the one who goes all in when everyone else hesitates is the one who walks away with everything. And from the moment he first climbed into a go-kart at 8 years old, in the parking lots and quiet cul-de-sacs of his Las Vegas neighborhood, that is exactly the kind of racer he became. His father, Tom, was a mechanic, a quiet, hard-working man who had carried his family from Illinois to Nevada, and who spent his weekends racing locally, not for fame, not for money, but because some passions simply cannot be contained by ordinary life. His older brother, Kurt, was already fast, already drawing serious attention from people who understood what raw speed looked like. And then there was Kyle, 7 years younger, smaller in some ways, louder in others, the kind of child who absorbs everything, the mechanical language spoken over engine blocks, the competitive electricity in the air whenever his brother raced, and quietly decides, without drama, without announcement, that he will surpass all of it. He spent the next 3 decades proving exactly that. By the time Kyle Busch was 16 years old, he was already competing against grown men in full-bodied stock cars. While other teenagers were navigating Friday night football games and the uncomplicated social rituals of high school, Kyle was learning in real time what it cost to go fast, and what it cost even more to be consistently faster than everyone else. He was signed with Joe Gibbs Racing at just 20 years old. He won Rookie of the Year in the Cup Series. And then he started winning everything else. The victories came quickly. Then they came constantly. Short tracks, super speedways, road courses, mile-and-a-half intermediates. It did not matter. He was fast everywhere, in every condition, under every kind of pressure. He raced with what those inside the sport called a controlled fury. Every overtake felt personal. Every lap felt like a statement. He created the Rowdy Nation, a fan base that did not simply support him, but claimed him, that saw in his refusal to be softened something they recognized in themselves. By 2015, his first Cup Series championship arrived. Then came 2019 and the second title, confirming what the first had only suggested. This was not a fluke. This was mastery. And running alongside those Cup victories were 69 wins in the Truck Series and 102 in what is now called the O'Reilly Auto Parts Series. Both records. Both untouchable. By the time Kyle Busch reached his final season, he had accumulated 234 victories across NASCAR's 3 national series. No driver in the history of the sport, not Richard Petty, not Dale Earnhardt, not Jeff Gordon, had ever won more. 6 days before he died, Kyle Busch won a race. On May 15, 2026, he climbed out of his truck at the EcoBoost 200 in Victory Lane, celebrated with his crew, thanked the people who had worked beside him, and performed every ritual of triumph exactly as he had performed it 233 times before. He had no reason to believe it would be the last time. 2 days later, he competed in the NASCAR All-Star race. 3 days after that, on the morning of Wednesday, May 20th, he arrived at the Chevrolet Simulator facility in Concord, North Carolina, the same building where he had spent countless hours over the years, sharpening the instincts that had made him the most prolific winner his sport had ever produced. He was preparing for the Coca-Cola 600 that weekend. His name was already on the entry list. His car was already in the garage. He sat behind the wheel of a machine designed to simulate danger without consequence, a controlled environment, a safe space. He never walked out. Emergency responders transported him to a hospital in Charlotte that afternoon, and on the morning of Thursday, May 21st, his family released a statement. The words were measured and quiet. Severe illness? No further details were offered. No timeline was given. Racing fans across America and around the world held their breath. At 5:40 in the afternoon, NASCAR confirmed what the silence had already begun to suggest. Kyle Thomas Busch, 2-time Cup Series champion, holder of 234 victories across NASCAR's National Series, was dead at 41 years old. Those inside the sport described the news as something they could not process. Denny Hamlin, his own teammate, said he absolutely could not comprehend it. Kevin Harvick, a man who had competed against Kyle for 2 decades, who had understood better than almost anyone exactly what kind of competitor Kyle Busch was, spoke through grief that carried the particular weight of someone who had spent 20 years trying to beat him and understood precisely what the world had just lost. Dale Earnhardt Jr., who by his own admission had a complicated history with Kyle across years of fierce rivalry, said simply that Kyle was one of the greatest drivers in NASCAR history, that no one could deny it. And then he added something that went beyond all statistics. He said his heart was broken for the Busch family. Those words, not about records, not about championships, but about a family, tell you everything about what this loss actually was. Because here is the thing that the win counter and the trophy presentations in the championship banners can never fully capture. Behind all of it, behind Rowdy and the Fury and the 234 victories, there was a father who, 2 days before he died, was writing birthday messages to his son. What most people didn't know was that the version of Kyle Busch the cameras captured, the helmet down, the jaw set, the driver who raced at people rather than simply against them, was only one half of who he truly was. The other half belonged to Samantha. They met when Kyle was already famous, already polarizing, already the lightning rod personality that NASCAR could not look away from and could not quite figure out what to do with. Samantha Sheets was not intimidated by any of that. She was sharp and grounded, and possessed of the kind of intelligence that sees through performance to the person underneath. She saw Kyle Busch, not the record, not the nickname, not the public figure the sport had built its complicated feelings around, and she chose him. They married in 2010. What most people didn't know was that Samantha did not stand at the edge of the track and simply wait for him to come home. She built. She founded Rowdy Energy, a beverage brand that grew from an idea into a nationally distributed company. A business built on the same relentless drive that defined her husband's racing, but expressed entirely through her own voice and her own vision. She did not live in Kyle's shadow. She built alongside him, brick by brick, season by season, with the kind of quiet determination that deserves its own standing ovation. And then came the children. Brexton Locke Busch arrived in 2015, the same year Kyle won his first Cup Series championship, 2 of the most significant victories of his life arriving in the same calendar year. The trophy and the boy. And those who watched Kyle from a distance noticed something shift in him that year, a depth that the Rowdy persona had never quite allowed the world to see fully. Lennox Harvey Busch arrived in 2020, a daughter. And something in Kyle softened further still. The man who refused to give an inch on the track gave everything at home. The man who raced with controlled fury loved with gentleness. What most people didn't know was that Brexton was already fast, already hungry, already the kind of young competitor that makes coaches sit forward in their seats. Kyle was not simply raising a child, he was watching himself reflected back through younger eyes and loving every moment of it. What most people didn't know was that in the months before his death, Kyle had been managing a sinus condition serious enough that he had requested a medical injection from his crew doctor at Watkins Glen, 11 days before he died. He raced anyway. He won anyway. Because stopping was simply not a language Kyle Busch had ever learned to speak fluently. What most people didn't know was that away from the track, he was a licensed pilot, a collector of classic race cars, not as status symbols, but as genuine connections to the mechanical history of a sport that had shaped his entire life. He and Samantha gave quietly and generously to children's health causes, without press releases, without public acknowledgement, without the need for anyone outside their immediate circle to know. The man the garage knew was real, but so was this one. The one who showed up for school pickups and coached his son from the sidelines and wrote birthday messages with the unhurried certainty of someone who had no idea the clock was running out. When the news broke on the afternoon of May 21st, the racing world did not simply mourn, it stopped. NASCAR's statement called him a future Hall of Famer, and then immediately corrected the instinct because future was no longer the right word. He was a Hall of Famer, present tense, immediate and unambiguous. The records demanded it. The moment required it. William Byron, one of the young drivers Kyle had given an early seat to through his Kyle Busch Motorsports team, posted to social media that night. He wrote that Kyle had helped shape his career into what it is. Christopher Bell, another driver who had come through Kyle's team, added his own words. Simple, direct, and carrying the full weight of what it means to say that someone changed the trajectory of your life. The Rowdy Nation, that loyal, passionate, deeply personal community of fans who had claimed Kyle when the rest of the world complicated its feelings about him, gathered online in the hours and days that followed. They shared memories. They posted photographs. They rewatched old race footage, searching for the moments they most needed to see again. A last lap charge. A victory burnout. A moment in an interview where he said exactly what he was thinking without softening it for anyone. For Samantha, the days that followed held a weight that no words are adequate to describe. She had built a life alongside this man. She had founded a company in his image and her own. She had raised 2 children with him. She had stood in every victory lane, absorbed every controversy, loved him through every complicated chapter of a career that was never simple and never small. And now she was in Charlotte, doing the hardest thing she had ever done, which was not any of those things. It was simply continuing. Reports confirmed that the official cause of death had not yet been released publicly. The family asked for privacy. NASCAR honored that request. The sport, for once, chose quietness over coverage. But what the racing world could not stop discussing, what fans kept returning to in the days after, was that final truck race on May 15th, the last victory. 6 days before the end, Kyle climbing out of that truck in victory lane, celebrating in the precise way he had celebrated 233 times before, with no awareness whatsoever that this was the closing sentence of a story 22 seasons in the writing. There is something almost unbearable about that proximity. 6 days between a victory celebration and a hospital room. 6 days between the last checkered flag and the last breath. The sport gave him one final win, as though it understood, in some way that none of us could have, that it was offering a closing statement worthy of everything he had given it. And the statement it offered was this: a win, not a retirement tour, not a farewell lap, not a commemorative ceremony with speeches and trophies and careful sentimentality, just a race, just a finish line, just Kyle Busch doing exactly what Kyle Busch had always done. Crossing it first. No driver in the history of NASCAR's National Series has done it more. Not Richard Petty, not Dale Earnhardt, not Jimmy Johnson, not any of the names the sport reaches for when it wants to remind itself of its own greatness. Kyle Busch stands alone at the summit of a mountain that took him 22 seasons to climb, and no driver currently racing is within realistic reach of it. But here is what the number itself cannot tell you. It cannot tell you about the young men he developed through Kyle Busch Motorsports. The William Byrons and Christopher Bells who now carry his influence in their muscle memory, racing with instincts shaped in part by the standard he demanded of everyone who came through his program. A standard that was never comfortable and never compromising, and never anything less than an honest reflection of what he believed the sport deserved. It cannot tell you about Rowdy Energy, Samantha's company, their shared brand, a business that will continue growing and employing people and carrying the name forward long after the race entries and the simulator sessions have faded into history. It cannot tell you about Brexton, who is already fast, who already carries his father's eyes and his father's hunger, and who has an entire lifetime ahead of him to chase his own victories. The birthday message Kyle wrote 2 days before he died was not a farewell. It was a beginning, a declaration passed from one generation to the next. There is no limit to what you'll accomplish. Those words now belong to Brexton in a way they did not when they were written, carrying more weight and more love than any birthday message should have to hold. It cannot tell you about Lennox, who will grow up learning her father through footage and testimony and the living memory of everyone he touched, finding him in race broadcasts and old interviews, and the particular way certain people's faces change when his name is spoken. And it cannot tell you about what Dale Earnhardt Jr. said in the days following Kyle's death. After years of complicated rivalry, after the friction and the competition and the complicated feelings that exist between two people who want the same thing and understand each other too well, Dale said that he was thankful they had found a way to become friends. That sentence carries more meaning than any win counter, because records are built by talent, friendships are built by character, and in his final years, Kyle Busch was quietly doing both. The records will stand. The friendship was just beginning. If you have been sitting with this story today, feeling something you cannot quite name, a heaviness, a tenderness, a particular kind of sadness that comes from losing someone you never personally knew, but somehow still feel the absence of, then you already understand what made Kyle Busch extraordinary. It was not simply the 234 wins. Records are numbers. Numbers do not grieve. What made Kyle Busch extraordinary was the wholeness of his life, the way he competed with everything he had and loved with everything he had, as if half measures were not available to him in any direction. The way he built a family with Samantha that was private and real and rooted. The way he wrote a birthday message to his son with the complete, unguarded certainty of a father who believed in the future. Most of us will never stand in a winner's circle, but most of us know what it means to show up for the people we love with everything we have. Most of us know what it means to believe in someone completely. Kyle Busch did both, every single day. And somewhere out there, a child in a go-kart is learning to go fast for the very first time, with no idea yet what they are capable of. No idea what is possible. No limit in sight. Kyle Busch would have wanted it exactly that way. If Kyle Busch was part of your Sunday afternoons, if you were Rowdy Nation, if you watched him win and lose and fight his way back, leave a comment and tell us your favorite memory of him. This is how legacies stay alive. This is how we honor the ones who gave us something to believe in. And if this tribute moved you, please subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications. Because the stories that truly matter, the ones about what people cost and what they leave behind, those are exactly the stories we are here to tell.